Hello, my name's Tom Palmer, and it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you as part of West Dunbartonshire's Library Week. And I'm really delighted that I've been asked to do an assembly for you. So I'm Tom Palmer and I write children's books. A lot of the books that I do are based around sport, so particularly football. So I've done football series like these, Football Academy, which is about a Premier League football team in England, but the under 12 players, so like the youth academy side. I've done Football and Crime, so this is about a boy and a girl solving crimes in the world of football. Football and Ghosts also, and I've got a series out called Roy of the Rovers, which features characters, including this. In fact, meet one of the characters. This is Rocky, and Rocky is one of the main characters in here, and she's a footballer. Anyway, but I also do history books, so I'm particularly interested in history. I know you've sent me a lot of questions for me to answer from your schools, and I know some of them are to do with history. So I've done history books like D-Day Dog, which is about a parachuting dog in the Second World War. Over the Line, which is about real footballers who went to fight in the trenches in the First World War. After the War, which is about survivors of the Second World War, children who came to this country as refugees and armistice runner. And what I was planning to do is I was going to give you sort of an introduction to me and how I write, and then like the how I go about planning and editing and stuff like that. But also I thought I could show you around my office. You can meet my dog, who's just over there on the chair, and then I've got about 20 questions from you to answer from your school. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next sort of 45 minutes to an hour, depending on, probably more like 45 minutes. So that's the assembly. So I suppose, how should I start? I should start by saying, although I'm a writer now, I was quite a reluctant reader. I didn't enjoy reading when I was younger, like under the age of 16, I suppose. And what got me into reading was my mum. And she knew that I struggled with reading. She knew that I wasn't that keen on reading, but she also knew that I loved football. So my mum got me reading about football, and she got me reading, I suppose she got me reading in newspapers and magazines and books. So I'd be reading, I've got some examples here. I'd read football magazines like World Soccer and Match magazine, and Match of the Day, which exists now. I'd read stuff like that, and gradually I got into reading through my love of football. I'd also read comic books as well. I struggled, to be quite honest, with pages and pages of words. I just didn't have the stamina to read them, but I would read comic books like these, and I would read magazines, and I would read newspapers, and gradually I became someone who got into reading, and now I love reading. I love reading, and that kind of made me into a writer. And I thought, if I want to be a writer, I should use the same sort of idea to become a writer as how I became a reader. I drew confidence from reading about what I loved, football. So I thought, I'm going to start by writing football books. So that's how my career started. But as you know, once you've done something a few times, in my case, written a few football books, you become more confident and you think you can do, you can push yourself further. So I started writing football and war books. And then I thought, I'm going to write a football and running book. And then I just write not football and running, war and running book. And then I started to write more history books without sport in them. And I gradually, as I became more confident as a reader, reading more broadly, I become more sort of confident as a writer. So that's my books. I suppose it'd be good. I think I'll show you around the office now. So I'm going to show you around my office, the room that I work in, to give you an idea of what it's like. And we'll meet the dog at the end there and have a little chat with him. And then when we've been around the office, I thought I could show you things about how I write, like the notebooks that I keep, the plans that I make, and stuff like that. Just to give you a few ideas about how I go about writing. But let's see. I'll show you around the office, so you can see what my room looks like, with the main highlight being the dog. So this is it. This is my office. So I suppose we're starting here. This is my desk where I do all my, hang on. That's my desk where I do videos. And because of COVID, I'm doing a lot of videos now. So that's kind of, this is a great place for me to work and talk to schools, because although I do go into schools still, not as many because of COVID. And then I suppose, oh yeah, under here, under there, you've got lots of boxes of stuff like posters and bookmarks and stuff like that. So it's really important as an author to have posters and bookmarks that you can give to schools and give to children, so that they remember, and if they like the sound of your books, then they can use the bookmark and go and see if they can find them in the library. Anyway, so on the top of this desk we've got what have we got? We've got a nice picture I was given as a present. We've got some money. We've got some, these are my cards that I give when I meet people who are interested in my work. I give them these cards so they can contact me. Then I've got like the different books that I'm working on. So I'm kind of working on 4 books at the moment. This one, which I won't go on about because I want to keep that one secret. This is my Roy of the Rovers box. So all my Roy of the Rovers books and material I keep in there. I'm writing a book about the Navy at the moment. So this one, this box is all the stuff about the book I'm writing about the Navy, and I'll show you the manuscript for that later, the book that I'm working on. And then I've got some other books on the end there about things that I might want to write books about in there. And that's kind of, I like to keep things in boxes in different sort of places, so that I can, when I'm working on a different book, I've got a different box. It's like, I suppose it's like on a computer, you keep things in different files, don't you? There's not much on the wall to show you other than my running numbers. That is about it. And the notice board and the whiteboard, which isn't in use. This is really important. This is my bookshelf. I love my bookshelf. It's got all the books and also some of the things I've picked up on my travels, because sometimes I set books in different countries. So I once set a book in Russia. So that's some Russian dolls. And that's sort of a Russian model I got. And also on the top, you can see on the top there's lots of trophies, and some of them are trophies sort of for awards that I've been given for books. So I sometimes win awards for books. That one on the end, obviously, though, isn't one that I won for a book, being the World Cup. Then what else? So this is my seat. Usually, well, it's supposed to be my seat, but actually, as you can see, it's got Finn in it, and this is Finn. Say hello, Finn. Put your head up and say hello. Finn says hello. And Finn, okay, go back to sleep. Finn's my dog, and he's actually a character in one of my stories, D-Day Dog, so I'll come to that in a bit. But you settle down now, because it's been an exhausting morning, hasn't it, Finn? So that's it, really. Oh yeah, and I've got characters. I've got cardboard cutouts of some of my characters as well. This is Roy, and this is Rocky. Right. I hope that was interesting. Reset this, but actually I don't do much writing in here because I like writing in the kitchen, because that's where the kettle is and biscuits and stuff like that. Anyway, so that's a tour of my office. That's an introduction to me, and the book I was talking about with the dog is this one. So D-Day Dog, it's about a boy who's got a dog called Finn, and that's my dog Finn there, but also it's about another dog. It's about a dog called Glenn. And Glenn, if I can just show you, that's Glenn. He was a parachuting dog in the Second World War. And this book is about dogs that were trained to parachute in and help defeat the Nazis in the Second World War, when the British Army, Navy and Air Force tried to liberate Europe on D-Day, which is a famous battle in the Second World War. So, and I do write about what I love. I wanted to write a story with my dog in it. I wanted to write a book with football in it, because I love football. I also wanted to write a book about a girl who was a runner, because my daughter does a lot of running. So I tend to write about things that I love, things that I enjoy. So that's kind of an introduction to me, and an introduction to my office. I'll just have a sip of my coffee. Cheers. So what I thought I could do now is show you kind of roughly how I go about writing a book. So I showed you over there was all the books in the different boxes. Excuse me. And they're kind of how I research things. I read books, I visit museums, I watch films, I talk to people who've experienced football or historical events, and I gather all that material, the research that I do, and I go online, obviously, like I'll go online and find stuff out, and that sort of gives me lots of material that I can put into my books. But I don't just keep it all in my head. I'm not very good at keeping stuff in my head. So what I do is I keep a notebook. So this is my notebook for the book I'm writing at the moment, and I'll show you the manuscript of that in a minute. And as you'll see all the way through, there are notes, lists. I mean, it all looks the same, really. It's just lots of books I've read, lots of places I've been to. One place I went to, this is a leaflet from the Russian Convoy, the Arctic Convoy Museum, which is at Loch Ewe, which is right in the northwest of Scotland, up near Ullapool. If you've ever been up that far. I went to that museum and I made lots of notes, as well as reading books and going online to find out materials about the things I want to write about. So that is how I go about researching a book, by taking lots of notes, and that helps me remember the stuff that I've researched. But I also keep scrapbooks. This is a scrapbook, and it's a bit of a mess, for the book I've written called After the War. Now, After the War is about a group of 300 children who survived the Second World War. They're Jewish children from Poland. Most of their families have been murdered by the Nazis. They don't have anyone left, and they've come as refugees to England initially, and then they went to other countries, and several of them went to Glasgow, actually, and then other places in England and Israel and America. But initially, for about 4 or 5 months, they left war-torn Europe and came to the Lake District in England, which, if you've ever driven down from Glasgow down into England, and it's all quite hilly, the first bit in England, mountain, well, not now mountainous compared to Scottish mountains, but mountainous for England anyway, that is the Lake District on your right as you're going down the motorway, and that's where they came to live. So kind of like, if you're going to go to England, the Lake District is the best place to go, because it's sort of lovely, beautiful scenery, like as you have lots of in Scotland. Anyway, so this is my scrapbook, and this helps me. This helps me get all my ideas, but not written down in words like in the notebook. It's all words, but this is in images. So I don't know if you've ever done a storyboard where you've recorded, where you've sort of got pictures and images or drawings, and that helps you to write a story. This is similar. So characters, I like to know what my characters look like, so I get pictures of the characters that I'm going to put in my books. And as you'll see, the cover has a picture of 3 boys, and it's not, you kind of imagine, that's kind of like, I think the illustrator looked at that picture and then did that as a kind of a from behind sort of view, which I kind of like. So you've got your characters, you've also got your settings, so the places they went to stay at and the places they lived in when these refugee children came to England. So I'm keeping sort of images together of characters and of settings. And another setting picture which is really important to me is the map. I like maps. I find when I'm writing a book, a map is really useful. So I know this is where those refugee children came to live. I know they stayed there by the lake. They used to go swimming just down there. They used to climb up this hill, this fell, and they used to sleep up there under the stars when it was a clear night to enjoy the beautiful views. They used to go shopping there, and they used to swim in there. I've said that already, haven't I? And they used to take boat trips up and down there. So this helps me to sort of gather my ideas, because I've got pictures and maps, and so when I'm describing a place or a setting, it's better because I can use my maps and my pictures. I've got other pictures of them when the children came. They had meals, they had schooling and other things that they were up to, and so those photos are really useful. But also another thing that was quite important when I was writing after the war that I liked to put in my scrapbook was this was one of the English families who lived in the place that the refugee children came to, and the English families, as all British people are, were really and should be, were really welcoming to these refugees and looked after them and helped them after the horrible things that they'd been through. And this is a girl called Joyce, and on her knee, I think if you can just see, there's a dog there called Spot, and they're characters in the book. And that's a family who lived in the place that the children came to stay in, and I wanted to know more about them. And so I met this lady, and this lady, that's 75 years ago, and that's now. This lady is Joyce, so this is Joyce now, and that was Joyce then, 75 years ago. So Joyce has told me loads of stuff about what it was like when these refugee children came to live in the place where she lived, and she's told me some wonderful stuff. And so I thought, I'm going to make her a character in the book. So as you see, I'll gather ideas from museums, talking to people, films, books, all sorts of different sources, and then I'll put them in a notebook and I'll put them in a scrapbook, and then I've got this is like the raw material, or like this is like the ingredients for a recipe. If you're making a cake, say, this is the flour and the sugar and the eggs and the butter and the other things that you want to put in. But it's all just in piles. It's not a story, it's not a cake, it's just the ingredients. So I have to turn this into this. How do I do that? I struggle to keep a lot of stuff in my head, which is why I write stuff like this down. But I also struggle to put it all in the right order. So for me, I don't know about you, planning is really important to me. I plan a lot, and because I plan a lot, I think the reason I'm a published author, I'm no genius, I'm just someone who works hard, but I think my two things that I'm quite good at is planning and editing. And I think to be a writer, if you can plan and think about what you're going to do, and then when you've done it, redo it a bit, that makes you a better writer. And that's why I think I'm a published author, because there's thousands of people who want to be published authors, but I think the reason what's the best way of putting it without sounding full of myself? I think the reason I've done all right at it is because I do a lot of planning, a lot of editing. So planning, I'll go on about editing later, don't worry. And I know some people don't like planning and some people don't like editing, and I get that. But I think if you can make yourself do it, what you write will be miles better, and people will enjoy reading it if you plan it and edit it. Anyway, enough preaching. This is the plan to after the war. So this is how I turned, I'll start again. This is my raw materials for the cake. That is the cake. Does this make sense? This is the recipe. So that's how you turn ingredients into a cake in the terms of a book. I've never used this metaphor before, but forgive me if it's not working. But if it does work, let me know, because I'll use it again. I don't know, because I'm doing this film in like a big 45-minute chunk, it might, it won't be perfect, let's be honest. So I'll shut up. This is a plan, and this is the plan for after the war, and it's about 2.5 meters long. In fact, I don't have the wingspan to actually hold it all in one. What's the best word? I don't have the wingspan to actually hold it all as one, so it's all out. But as you'll see, there are loads and loads of blue post-it notes, and some green, orange and yellow ones. The blue ones are different scenes that happen in the book, and the other coloured ones are characters and the major events that happen to those characters. This is really useful to me, and I spent about a week putting the scenes in the right order, making sure it all worked out, and that was really useful for me, and that was my planning. So that's like the recipe for the book. I'll just put this away. So that's how I plan things, and once I've done that, and I use post-it notes because I find when you're doing a plan, if you type it or write it, it's kind of stuck on the page and you can't move it around. Whereas if you do it on post-it notes, you can shift them around and put them in a different order to tell the story in a different way. And I think that frees me from doing a plan like as a list, because a list is sort of in the same order and you can't move it around unless you cut it up. And this is my way of doing a plan. So use post-it notes to do a plan. Obviously it doesn't need to be 3 meters long, but even using 5 post-it notes and putting the post-it notes in different order and see what that does to your story. See if it makes it better if you tell it in a different way. It's an interesting thing to try to do, to write a story if you're interested in stories. So we've done the plan, then I type up the book, and then I write the book basically. This is the book I'm writing at the moment. So I showed you, excuse me, I showed you this is that's what the cover's going to look like, but it's not, the book is going to be called Arctic, what's it going to be called? Arctic Star, there we are, Arctic Star. So that's the cover, that's my notebook, and this is the actual manuscript. So I write the book. This is a long book, you know, it's like 150 pages long. Well, it's a longish book. I write, once I've done my plan, I write it, I get it all down, but then when I've written it, editing. There are there's loads of different stages to editing, but the 2 main ones are, I go through and I write, I look and I make notes. I make notes as to how I'm going to change it. So I read my manuscript, my words, and then I make notes. For instance, I put there, who is he? So this basically, a new character arrives on page 7, and I put, who is he? We need to know who he is. We need a better description, because it's just Joseph turns up. Who is he? You know, we need to actually know a bit more about him. Some pages are a right mess because I need to do loads of changing. I'm crossing out whole chunks of stuff, and I've put extreme peril because that means danger. So I need to make it feel more dangerous, because he's just fallen in the sea, and it's like, oh, and he fell in the sea and it was a bit cold. I need to make it a bit more exciting, like he gasped for air, his lungs were filled with salty water, he felt like he was going to drown, etc. So I go through and I look at the weak points in my book, and there again, like huge peril, I've got to make it more exciting. And then I find out facts. So these boys are in a ship that sinks, and if you're in a ship that sinks during the Second War, you get, after it's sunk and you survive, if you survive, you get survivor's leave. So I discovered that. So I can add all those extra things to the manuscript, but as well as that, there is another kind of editing that I do. So I've done my big sort of structured editing, but as well as that, once I've done that and I've made the changes, I have to edit it, line edit it. So you've got your big edit. So your big edit being your big chunky changes, but then you've got your line edit, which is your smaller edit. And if you look at this, you'll see that I've crossed out a line, I've crossed out a paragraph, but I've replaced it with something else, or I've swapped a word, 2 words for another 2 words, or I've just tinkered with it and line edited it. So you're sort of replacing words, taking words away, putting new words in, just making it better. I find my big thing I do is I read it aloud. If you read something aloud, you can spot some of the things. Like I have to do 12 drafts. I don't just write a book and it's, oh, there it is, it's a book, and it comes out as a nice sort of attractive thing like that. It takes me 6, 7, 8 months to write a book like this, and a lot of that time is spent editing and checking and trying to improve it. The first draft I do is not good, and I guarantee if you wrote something and edited it 3 times, it would be better than my first draft by a mile, because my first drafts anyone does, unless you're a genius, which I'm not, are pretty ropey, but editing can turn something into something much better. So that's the stages of writing. Then once I've done all that, I send it to my publisher, and my editor at the publisher works with me to make this book as good as we can possibly make it. So that's the writing process. So what have we done? I've introduced myself, tick. I've shown you my dog and my office, tick. I've shown you the process of writing, tick. So and we're halfway through this video. So I've now got these questions which I've been sent from various schools in West Dunbartonshire, and I thought I could answer these. And how many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I'll give about a minute or 2 minutes to answer each question. Then that should take us to about 45, 50 minutes in our film. Right. So let's start. So the first bunch is bunch a good word. The first, what's the best word? Tranche. This is like editing, isn't it? First collection maybe of questions. That's what happens in my head. You know when you're writing and you're trying to find the right word, do you ever get that you go through 2 or 3 words before you choose the right one? And I think that's what I do when I'm writing, actually. Anyway, so St Mary's Primary School, Alexandria. I've been to a city called Alexandria in Egypt. It was lovely. Is from Darcy, and the question is, what inspired you to begin writing and publishing your books? Very good question, Darcy. I'll tell you what, I'm going to mark them off so I'll make sure I've done everyone. I started writing because I loved reading. As I said earlier, I got into reading through football. And once I got into reading, I loved it. And I couldn't believe that books can make you laugh, cry, want to travel to another country. I read books and I thought, I'm going to travel there. There's a book on those shelves, right, that was set in North Africa, and it's set in the Sahara Desert. And I read it when I was about 25, and I read it, and it was this amazing place, and I thought I want to go there one day. And I was a bit skint. I didn't have much money at the time, but when I was about 30, I had a bit more money, and I saved up, and I went to the Sahara Desert. And while I was there, I had a beautiful, amazing time, and it was lovely, in a country called Morocco. And that is where I met my wife. When I met my wife, and if I'd have not read that book up there that's set in the Sahara Desert in North Africa, I would never have met my wife. My daughter would never have been born. I wouldn't be in this house talking to you. I probably wouldn't be a writer, to be honest, because my wife's helped me a lot. All the good things in my life happened because of that book over there on the shelves. And every book, if I actually look at every book on there, I realise it's done something for me in my life. It's led to me being happier, or going on a journey, or learning a lesson. And that's why I love books. And so, what we're talking about. So I began writing and publishing because I began to love books, and I thought, I want to be like those writers. I want to be like those writers who can make me think and feel and love and laugh. And so I want to be a writer like that, and that's why I became a writer. Next question, and that's why I tried to get published. Leah, also from St Mary's Primary School, what inspired you to write about war in particular, as it can be very difficult to cope with? That is a really good question. That is a really good question. As I write about war because I can't get my head around it. I cannot understand how a 19-year-old young man can jump out of an aeroplane into the dark with his dog to go and defeat a massive war machine like Nazi Germany. I cannot understand how Nazi Germany can persecute and murder millions of Jewish people. I don't get it, and I don't get how those Jewish people who survived that can cope with what happened to them and go on to have rich, lovely lives in this country and in other countries. And so, because they survived terrible things, and then they went on to have rich experiences, like having families, and so one of them ended up in the Olympics for Great Britain. And so all these things, I like to understand it. And it's the same with trench warfare and anything. I just can't understand it, and that's why I write about war. To be clear, I write about war. I hate war, but I kind of want to understand the impact it has on the individuals, the people who are involved in war, and that's why I write about it, I think, because I definitely don't like it. I would hate to be involved in one, either doing it or having it done to me. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, right, Ayla asks, I'm from St Mary Primary School as well, are there any authors who inspired you, and why? Lots of authors. I mean, you saw my books earlier, and all of those authors helped me. I think the more books you read, the better you become at at writing, because you learn what you like and you learn what you enjoy. So all those books I learned loads from them, but particular ones that I love are Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I used to think that to be an author, you had to be from London and posh, and really clever and rich and all these things. But actually, because I thought that people like me from Northern England could not be writers, I thought you had to be Londonish and posh, and which is completely wrong, because there's loads of authors from Yorkshire, loads of authors from Scotland. You don't have to be a particular kind of person to be an author. You have to be you to be an author, and to really try and want to write books yourself. But I read Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, and that's set in Yorkshire. It's set kind of over the hills about 8 miles that way, and it's by a young woman from Yorkshire, and that made me think maybe you can be a writer from where I'm from, and that's how I came up. That sort of inspired me mostly, I think, reading authors local to me that made me believe in myself that I could be a writer, as you can, most definitely. Olivia, also from St Mary's, how do you get your story started? Because sometimes I think that's the hardest part. Great question. It is the hardest part. Planning helps, but we've covered that. The other thing I would say with me, with starting a story, is I don't like reading books that start, it was a lovely day, the sun was shining in the sky and rain was falling, probably at the same time or not, and the wind was blowing, and so and so were walking down the road, and it's boring, and I sort of like to be there right in the middle of the action. So I'm going to read you some starts briefly. I missed this runner. Lily accelerated, keeping her eyes on the 3 girls ahead of her. She was 10 metres behind them and within striking distance as they climbed the muddy, waterlogged path. Right, so that's a girl who's in a race and she's desperate to get past these other runners. Hopefully, you want to know whether she gets past them. You want to know what it's going to be like, if she's going to achieve what she's trying to achieve. Next one, let's try this one. Even though he was, this is after the war, even though he was afraid, Yossi forced himself to crawl to the window in the side of the aeroplane. There were no seats, so he had to crouch and stay on all fours, as he and the other passengers were thrown about by the turbulence. So that's not quite as strong a start as that one, is it? But it's kind of like, why is he afraid? What's happening? I'll do one more. Let's do a football one. Ghost Stadium. 3 Year 9 boys walked out of the gates of their high school. They kept a fast pace, matching each other step for step. Lucas, Jack and Irfan had something to do, something exciting, something risky, and they wanted to get started as soon as possible. So what I'm trying to do with those is I'm trying to start right in the middle of the action, so there's no description, you're just straight into an event, and that I'm trying to make the reader want to know what's going to happen next. What is going to happen next? Is Lily going to win the running race? What are the boys going to do that's so dangerous and exciting? Why is Yossi afraid? And if you start right in the middle of the action, and almost within the first 30 words, first paragraph or two, make your reader desperate to know what's going to happen next. That's what I do with starting stories. Great question. Ethan, also from St Mary's. How many books have you written altogether? So this is my 50th book that I've written that's been published, but I've also written 6 or 7 books that haven't been published. Not everything I write is good enough. Because not everything I write is good enough, not everything gets published, but most of it does get published. But I suppose, like, if you're a writer, you have to try and make every book as good as you can, because if you don't, it's not going to get published. My editor, for example, this, I've not finished this yet, and my editor, who's in Edinburgh, she's reading this at the moment. If she likes it, she'll say, great, let's go ahead. If she doesn't, she might not publish it, and if she doesn't publish it, it won't get made into a nice book with its pretty naval cover. I won't get my money because I get paid for writing my books. So I've got to make sure every book is as good as I can. So everything I do, I try and do my best to make sure I still keep being an author. Kayla, from St Mary's also, what is your favourite book you've written and why? Armistice Runner is my favourite book for two reasons. Reason one, it's about a girl who's a runner, and it's based loosely on my daughter who used to do a lot of running. I love this book because it reminds me of when my daughter and I used to do a lot of running on the hills together. But also, I showed you those book awards up there earlier. I had never won a book award before this was published. Suddenly, I won 8 children's book awards with this, and I went from. I mean, I love running. I never thought I would win a book award, and I was happy writing. But once I started winning book awards, it kind of made me feel maybe I am all right at writing. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I should try and write about more challenging subjects. So winning book awards, and because it's about my daughter who I love, is why I love that book. Fraser from St Mary's, are there any characters in your stories based on real life characters that you've met? Good question. Right, well, she's loosely based on my daughter, as I've said. Yes, so these boys, they survived the Second World War, and they came to live in the UK as survivors, as refugees, and some of them are still alive, and their story is very harrowing and very difficult, and I've met 3 of them, and they have told me their stories, and that really helped me to write this book. So yes, absolutely. This is based on, it's about 3 boys who camp in a football stadium one night, and the 3 boys are kind of loosely based on 3 of my mates. And then of course you've met Finn, the dog over there. Finn is the main character, one of the main characters in this book. So yeah, I do base my characters on real people from history and real people from my friends and family, because to be quite honest, making up a character from scratch is hard, whereas if you base a character on a real person, it's easier. For instance, Rocky here. Rocky is based on a character. My wife and I watch one of the Australian soap operas, and Rocky's based on one of the characters from that. So I do base people on real people. Anyway, how am I doing for time? I'm doing okay. Sam, this is the last question from Sam from St Mary's. What advice would you give to someone who doesn't really like writing but wants to get better? Good question. Apart from write about what you love, because you're going to be more interested in it, because you're writing about what you're interested in, my big thing would be to read, and whatever you like, read about that. You don't have to read big, thick novels. You can read non-fiction books, websites, newspapers, magazines, anything. But if you read, and make sure it's stuff that you want to know about. Like, so with me, it was football. If you read, you naturally become a better writer. You don't even have to think about it. It's just, I swear it's true. You start to put sentences together and use better words, and you start to enjoy it more because you've read stuff that you've enjoyed reading. And it's like, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor for it. Could I take it back to the cake metaphor? I suppose if you've this might not work. If you make a cake, if you watch other people making cakes and then you eat the cakes that they've made, you will, after a while, like if you watch Bake Off, for instance, you will probably could become better at baking because you've seen people making cakes and you'll know what looks nice and what the judges like. That's a pretty loose metaphor, but so that I would definitely say read lots. And for me, it was football magazines, football match programs, football biographies, stuff like that. Read, and you will become naturally better at writing, even if you find it hard. Right, the next questions are from Ballock Primary. Duncan asks, would you ever write about wars that are going on in the world right now rather than in the past? Yes, I have. I've not got that book to hand at the moment, but I have written about modern warfare, and I think it's really important. I think you've raised a really good point, Duncan. There's no point in crying and getting sad about wars in the past. Well, there is. It's good to remember soldiers and people who've suffered in wars in the past, and kind of the main reason for that is to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because if we think about what happened in the First World War and what happened in the Holocaust to the Jewish people, we have to stop wars happening. Like, for instance, if there was a world leader who was dangerous and he was making the world a more insecure place, we might try and we might protest, or we might talk to people we know in that country where he's from to make them vote him out, and maybe he'll get voted out, and a new president, a new leader might come in. And that is really important, that if we see wars possibly happening, if we see conflict, we try desperately to find a peaceful way, and when our families vote for politicians, we vote for people that we think are going to do the right thing and be peaceful. And that's why yesterday, when I saw that Joe Biden had won the American election, defeating Donald Trump, I feel that, I'm sure a lot of people will agree with me, personally I feel like the world would be a safer place, because I think Joe Biden is a more peaceful, thoughtful person who's more likely to have conversations with enemies rather than just go to war with them. But that's just my personal political opinion. Obviously, there are other opinions available. Anyway, sorry, I shouldn't go into politics. So, Fraser asked, do you like writing about football or rugby most? That's a good question. Do you know what? I write about football the most because football books sell better, but rugby is a more interesting game to describe because of there's so many rules and so many different moves. Football's quite simple, isn't it? In a good way, kicking the ball around, and there's the offside rule and fouling and stuff like that. But rugby, there's so many little intricate rules that make it more interesting to write about, to be quite honest. So rugby is more interesting to write about, but I do tend to do more football books, frankly, because I get paid more for writing football books than rugby books, to be honest. Caitlin, do you find it harder to write girl characters? I really like Lily, an armistice runner. Will she be in more books? Thank you. That's a lovely question, Caitlin. Thank you. I find it. I've got one child and she's a girl, and obviously, like in the past, I was a boy many years ago. So I think because I've had a daughter and I've spent a lot of time with her and her friends, and I don't struggle as much to write girls characters, and Lily is sort of based on my daughter, and there's loads of girl characters in my books. Charlotte in this series, Maddie, and in that series, and so and Joyce in this one. So I like writing girl characters or boy characters, and I suppose I think that's a good question. I should have thought about this before, shouldn't I? I think it's down to the personality of the person, and not whether they're a girl or a boy. But I don't think I struggle writing girl characters, but I kind of like writing both. That's a really good question. Do you know what? I should have read these questions before and thought about that one, Caitlin, because that was a really good question. Well, they all were. Scott, also from Ballot Primary. If you weren't a writer, what would your dream job be? I'd like to be an explorer. I'd like to explore places that people haven't been to before, like the Amazon rainforest or the Arctic, and I know people have been everywhere, haven't they? But I'd like to be an explorer. I think that'd be really interesting. But then I'd want to write about it. But I'd do it and secretly write about it. Good question, Scott. Cameron, would you ever write a story set in the coronavirus pandemic? Good question. And that's Cameron from Ballot Primary as well. Do you know what? It's such a good question. I don't think I would. I'm sure I'm fed up with it, and I'm sure you're fed up with it, and I know people who've had it and who've suffered quite badly with it. Fortunately, no one I know has died of it, but I just don't want to go anywhere near it. Do you know what I mean? I just don't. I might maybe years in the future, but to be honest, no. We just need to get past it, don't we, and do the right thing, and then get past it, and hopefully there'll be a vaccine, and I'm sure, I really believe there will be come the spring. So and then we can all get back to more normal. So I don't think I would write about it, but I'm sure lots of people will if that's what you'd like to read about, definitely. Right, thank you. So that was Ballock Primary. We've now got 4 questions left. Harry from Christie Park Primary. Would you like your books to be made into graphic novels? Yes, I would love it. I would love to see my books as graphic novels or films or TV shows, but no one's offered and I'm rubbish at drawing, so it's probably not going to happen unless a graphic novel writer does that. But I'd love it. So like because I've read the Alex Rider books like Stormbreaker and them, and I've read the graphic novels of those. And I like graphic novels, as I showed you earlier, so yeah, I'd love it. Noah, also from Christie Park Primary, what's your favourite place to read a book? Good question. Bed, I suppose, or in the summer at the front garden, or on holiday. You know, when you're on, well, I haven't done this much and not for a while, but like a couple of times with my wife and daughter, we've been on those holidays where you go and sit, there's a hotel and a pool and it's sunny and palm trees and all that. And we do, you know, we go out to places to visit places, but just sitting around the pool and knowing you can be all there all day reading. I love that. I really, really love that. Good question. Noah. Fraser, this is the last question from Christie Park Primary. Is there anywhere in the world you've not been to and you would like to set a book in? Yes, Japan, Fraser. I'd love to go to Japan and set a book there. I don't know why. I really like the look of Japan, and I've watched films and I've read books set in Japan, and there's things I really like about it. And there's a school in Japan who've been reading my books, and I've sort of said to them, do you want me to come over and do a school visit? And we might, once Corona's done with, hopefully next spring, summer, I might get over to Japan, because it's quite expensive flying there. So I'd kind of, if I went there, I'd probably, and because my wife doesn't want to go to Japan, I'd probably have to go to do a school over there because I couldn't afford to pay for it for myself. But I'd love to go there, definitely. Right, last question. This is from Levendale or Levendale Primary. I'm sorry for not getting it 100% right. Andrew, what is your favourite word? Right, I'll write my favourite word down. What a mess. Sorry. Right, my favourite word is juxtapose. And I like the word juxtapose. It means, if you don't know, like putting two things together, like a coffee cup and a pen. Or, I've just spilled my coffee now. Or a cardboard cutout and a scarf. And it's like, it's kind of like putting two things together that haven't been together before, and it creates something new. Yes, Finn, you can drink the coffee if you want to drink it. Do you want to drink it? Or a dog's allowed to drink coffee? Maybe I better not do that. Anyway, so on that dramatic bombshell, me spilling my coffee on the floor, I'm going to stop because I've answered all your questions, and I've got to say they were fantastic questions. Well done. I really enjoyed answering them. They were really thoughtful questions as well. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this assembly. I've really enjoyed it, apart from the fact I've spilled my coffee, but I've really enjoyed it. I suppose because of your questions, so thank you very much. Stay there, Finn. Stay there. Don't drink the coffee. I'm not sure if you can. Anyway, so thank you very much for listening. I'm now going to stop my dog from drinking the coffee. I wish you all a wonderful book week, and also I'd like to wish you and your families a good winter, and I hope come the spring things are looking good. Thank you very much, and all the best to all of you. See you later.